Fun with Stories. This podcast contains audio advertising. To hear it without ads, download the Fun with Stories app now. Welcome to Fun with Stories, the podcast where words come to life through exciting adventures and laugh-out-loud moments. Every episode, we take a tricky word, throw it into a fun-filled story featuring your favorite fairy tale and folk story characters, and make sure you'll never forget it. So, are you ready to learn new words the fun way with Little Red Riding Hood, Puss in Boots, the Gingerbread Man, Snow White, and more? Then let's jump into today's adventure on Fun with Stories.
Clear words, tasty wins. Jasper's simple sandwich proves that clarity always tastes better than confusion. At Treetop Primary, lunchtime was always a big deal. But this week, it was everything. The Junior Chef Challenge was reaching its final round, and the winning sandwich recipe would be added to the school menu forever. The winner's name would go up on the Hall of Fame board, and they'd get to speak at Friday assembly, in front of the whole school. Miss Maple stood at the front of the classroom, clipboard in hand. All right, chefs, you have until the end of the day to write and pin your sandwich recipes on the board. Tomorrow, the Student Cooking Club will prepare each one exactly as written, so make sure your instructions are clear, not confusing. She gave a knowing look. And don't try to sound too fancy. That can obfuscate things. A few kids blinked. Miss Maple added, "To obfuscate means to make something less clear and harder to understand, especially on purpose." Jasper smiled. He already had his recipe ready: peanut butter, strawberries, and granola on cinnamon bread. You know what? It was his absolute favorite: sweet, crunchy, and something he made every Sunday with his dad. He carefully pinned it to the board. Felix stood nearby, watching. He hadn't written his yet. He stared at Jasper's simple recipe, then at his own blank sheet. And something twisted, both in his mind and his stomach. He smiled, weirdly. The next morning, the cooking club was hard at work. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon, honey, and toasted bread. Until they got to one puzzling recipe. A student read aloud. "Begin with a swirl-infused baked grain slab. Apply a nut-based protein cream. Place sliced red fruit and crumbled clusters of baked oats. Assemble using rotational stacking." Someone whispered, "Is this a sandwich or a science project?" Jasper passed by with napkins for the judges, and then he froze. "That's my sandwich, but in the most confusing way possible." He turned to Felix, who stood off to the side, looking small. "Felix, did you take my recipe and obfuscate it?" Felix fidgeted. "I just wanted it to sound more impressive. Yours was so good, I thought if I made it sound smarter, maybe I'd have a chance." Jasper blinked. "But that made it worse." He sighed. "When you obfuscate something, when you make it less clear and harder to understand, especially intentionally, you don't help anyone. You just confuse people, even yourself." And that's exactly what happened. One student used chocolate cake instead of cinnamon bread. Another added cherries instead of strawberries. One gave up entirely and made plain toast. The judges looked more baffled with each bite. One even spat into a napkin. Felix sat on the bench, head in his hands. The judging went on all morning. Each sandwich was scored for taste and clarity. By lunch, the results were sealed. At assembly, Miss Maple stepped up with a golden badge. The winner of the Junior Chef Challenge is Jasper! The crowd cheered. Jasper beamed. And Felix? He clapped the loudest. Not because he had to, but because he meant it. Jasper took the mic. I didn't win because my sandwich was fancy. I won because it was clear and simple. When people obfuscate things, when they make something less clear and harder to understand, especially intentionally, they just make a mess. Miss Maple smiled. And for the curious, the word obfuscate comes from the Latin word obfuscare, which means to darken or cover, like when fog covers a window and you can't see clearly. She held up Jasper's original recipe. No fog here, just a clear, delicious idea. So let's pause for a moment and talk about that funny little word you just heard, obfuscate. Spelling O-B-F-U-S-C-A-T-E. Obfuscate. But what does obfuscate mean? It means to make something less clear and harder to understand, especially on purpose. Synonyms of obfuscate include confuse, blur, complicate, muddle, and the antonyms include clarify, explain, simplify, illuminate. Here are 2 quick examples. The instructions were so complicated, they only served to obfuscate how to play the game. Don't obfuscate your answer. Just tell us what really happened. Try using the word obfuscate in your everyday speech, especially when something is made confusing on purpose.
And that brings us to the end of today's adventure. We've explored a brand new word, had some fun with our favorite storybook characters, and now it's your turn to use it in real life. Want more fun stories and exciting words to learn? Download the Fun with Stories app for extra content, activities, and even more magical word adventures. Thanks for listening, and remember, words are powerful when you make them yours. See you next time on Fun with Stories.